They tossed the worn-out suitcases onto the ground, glanced at their own parents sitting in the dust of the road and shouted, "You're useless now." With that, they turned their backs and walked away, laughing. "Let's see if they survive without us," one of them quipped. But what these children didn't know was that their old father held a secret worth millions, and by the time they found out, it was far too late. Antonio was awake before the sun. He was always an early riser, a habit forged from a lifetime of labor. But this day felt different. There was a gleam in his eye that his wife, Rosa, hadn't seen in a long while. He gently nudged her shoulder. "Wake up, woman. The children are coming to get us today." Rosa's eyes fluttered open and she offered a smile that only a person who has found happiness throughout life can muster, even when life has been anything but easy. Their children had called a few days prior, announcing they would take them to see a country house. They claimed they were considering buying a place in the countryside for the whole family to gather on weekends. "Imagine it, Antonio. We'll get to watch the grandchildren playing in the yard," Rosa said, tidying her white hair in front of a cracked mirror. They lived in a modest little house at the back of a rented lot, 3 small rooms that barely contained their old furniture. Antonio had spent 50 years as a bricklayer's assistant, while Rosa did sewing and laundry to make ends meet. They had raised their 3 children, Marcelo, Patricia, and Bruno, in that very house, giving them everything they could, and often much more than they could afford. Antonio smoothed out the pants he had ironed the night before and put on his finest shirt, one reserved for special occasions. Rosa wore the floral dress a neighbor had given her, still in good condition, almost spotless. The 2 of them waited by the door. "Will they be long?" Rosa wondered aloud. "Patience, woman. They said they'd come early," Antonio replied, though deep down he was just as anxious. It had been months since their children had visited, always citing busy schedules and endless obligations. Marcelo had become a manager at a large store, Patricia worked in an office and constantly complained about her workload, and Bruno had started a business that kept him glued to his phone, solving one problem after another. When 2 cars pulled up, Rosa clapped her hands like a child. "Look, Antonio, they all came." But as the 3 of them got out of the cars, something felt off. There were no smiles, no hugs, no kisses. Marcelo just nodded while staring at his phone. Patricia huffed and glanced at her watch. Bruno barely looked at his parents. "Let's go. I have an appointment later," Patricia said curtly. Rosa felt a knot tighten in her chest but said nothing. Antonio helped her into the back seat of Marcelo's car. As he was about to get in, Bruno stopped him. "Dad, you ride in my car. Mom can stay with Marcelo." "But can't we go together?" Rosa asked, her voice thin. "There's no room. Come on, don't dawdle." Rosa looked at Antonio, alarmed. He forced a smile, as if to say everything was fine, but something inside him ached. They got into separate cars, and the journey began in silence. Rosa tried to make conversation with Marcelo. "Son, it's been a while. How are the children?" "They're fine, Mom." "And Vivienne? Is she well?" "She's fine." Patricia, in the front seat, typed furiously on her phone. Rosa gave up and watched the city disappear behind them. Soon, the landscape grew unfamiliar. Dirt roads, houses spaced further and further apart, until there was nothing but dry earth under a vast blue sky that seemed to press down on them. In the other car, Antonio also tried to talk to Bruno, but his son only offered one-word replies, his phone ringing constantly with calls about business, money, and problems. Antonio stared out the window, remembering how many times he had held this boy in his arms when Bruno was little and afraid to sleep alone. After nearly 2 hours, both cars stopped in the middle of nowhere. An old paved road cut through a desert of cracked earth. There were no houses, no poles, no shade, just the hot sun beating down on everything. "Get out, Mom," Marcelo said, opening the door. "But the country house isn't here, is it, son? Just get out." Confused, Rosa stepped out. She saw Antonio getting out of the other car with the same bewildered expression. Bruno went to the trunk, pulled out 2 old suitcases, the ones his parents used for visiting sick relatives, and threw them on the ground, kicking up dust. "What is this?" Antonio asked. Marcelo stepped forward, his gaze colder than they had ever seen. Look, we've already discussed this among ourselves. We can't do this anymore. You're always asking for help, always having health problems, needing medicine, needing food. We have families, bills to pay, our own lives. Rosa began to tremble. Son, we never asked for anything you couldn't give. It's always the same story, Patricia shouted, getting out of the car. Always needing something. We're tired, Mom. We're tired of being burdened, of having to give you attention, of having to worry. But we're your parents, Antonio said, his voice shaking, and we appreciate everything you did. Bruno added, avoiding his father's eyes. But it's time you learn to fend for yourselves. We can't carry you forever. Rosa collapsed to her knees in the dust, her sobs racking her body. For the love of God, don't do this to us. We have nowhere to go. We don't know anyone here. You always found a way before. You'll have to find one again, Marcelo said, turning back to his car. Antonio took a step forward. Marcelo, I held you in my arms the day you were born. I worked while sick to pay for your education. I sold the only piece of land my father left me so you could go on that graduation trip you wanted so badly. And now you're going to leave me here in the middle of nowhere? Marcelo paused. For a second, it looked like he might turn back. But then Patricia honked the horn. Let's go. The longer we stay, the worse it gets. Bruno was already in his car. Marcelo took one last look at his parents. Rosa was clinging to Patricia's dress, pleading, Daughter, I gave birth to you. I carried you for 9 months. I nursed you in the middle of the night. I stayed awake when you had a fever. How can you do this? Patricia yanked herself free. You gave us the life you could. Now it's our life, and you're not part of it anymore. She got in the car and slammed the door. Marcelo followed. The two cars reversed, turned around, and drove away, kicking up a cloud of red dust that enveloped everything. Rosa screamed, calling her children's names until her voice was raw. Antonio stood frozen, watching the cars vanish around a bend. When the sound of the engines faded, only a heavy silence remained, a silence that felt louder than any noise. Rosa's cries subsided. She knelt in the dirt, her hands filthy, staring blankly ahead. Antonio sat beside her and took her hand. They sat there on the edge of that empty road, their old suitcases beside them, under a merciless, burning sun. Two people who had given their entire lives for a family that had just discarded them. What do we do now? Rosa whispered. Antonio squeezed her hand. He had no answer. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. The first hour was the worst. Rosa couldn't stop staring down the road, hoping the cars would return, that one of her children had had a change of heart, a flicker of conscience. But the road remained empty, hot, and lifeless. Antonio got up slowly, his legs aching from a knee problem that had plagued him for years, a result of a lifetime of heavy lifting. He opened one of the suitcases and found the small water bottle Rosa always packed. It was half full. He gave it to her first. Drink, woman. What about you? I'll drink later. Rosa took 2 small sips and handed it back. Antonio took a single gulp and saved the rest, unsure how long they would be stranded. Thirst was already setting in, and the sun seemed to intensify with each passing minute. Antonio, not a single car has passed, Rosa said, wiping dried tears from her face. One will. It has to. But deep down, he was afraid. The road seemed forgotten, its pavement cracked and overgrown with weeds. There were no signs, no fences, nothing to suggest it was a traveled path. Rosa sat on the larger suitcase, her legs giving out. She looked at her husband and saw a familiar expression on his face. The look he got when he was lost in memory. What are you thinking about? She asked. He took a moment to reply, wiping sweat from his brow. I'm thinking about everything we did for them, Rosa. Everything. The memories washed over him. He remembered the day Marcelo got into college, coming home shouting with joy, promising to make something of himself. But the tuition was expensive. Antonio had a small plot of land left to him by his father, his only valuable possession. He went to the notary, sold the land for less than it was worth, and paid for his son's entire first year. Remember when I sold my father's land? He asked. Rosa nodded. Of course she remembered. You didn't want to. You said that land was for our old age, and I convinced you to sell it. I said Marcelo's future was worth more, and we believed it, Antonio. We believed that if we gave our children everything, they would take care of us when we grew old. Antonio sat beside her on their makeshift bench of old suitcases. He took her hand again, that wrinkled hand, calloused from so much work. Rosa was remembering too. She recalled when Patricia fell ill with pneumonia as a child. The doctors said she needed an expensive imported medicine. Rosa had worked for 3 straight months, washing clothes late into the night without rest or complaint. Her hands were raw, but she bought the medicine, and Patricia recovered. I nearly destroyed my hands to save Patricia, Rosa said, looking at them. And today, she looked at me with disgust, as if I were less than nothing. Don't talk like that. But it's the truth, Antonio. Did you see the way she spoke to me? That we're not part of their lives anymore? Rosa's voice broke, and fresh tears came. Antonio held her, letting her cry on his shoulder. He wanted to cry too, but he held it back. Someone had to be strong. The sun was at its peak now. It must have been noon, maybe 1 in the afternoon. The heat was unbearable. Antonio stood, gave Rosa another sip of water, and took one himself. Only a finger's width of water remained. He saved it. We need shade, he said. But there was no shade, only a concrete pole by the side of the road. He dragged the suitcases over, creating a tiny patch of shadow. He sat Rosa down and stayed beside her. That's when they heard it. A distant engine, but it was coming toward them. Rosa jumped to her feet. Antonio, a car is coming. They stood at the edge of the road, the sound growing louder. It was an old cargo truck, its blue paint faded. Antonio began waving both arms frantically. Rosa did the same. The truck slowed. For a moment it seemed it would drive past, but it stopped a few meters ahead. A man climbed out of the cab. He looked to be in his 70s, thin, sun-weathered, wearing a worn-out shirt and an old cap. He looked at the elderly couple, at their suitcases, and frowned. What happened here? He asked. Antonio didn't know where to begin. Rosa lowered her head in shame. The man came closer, seeing the distress on their faces. Are you all right? Do you need help? We were left here, Antonio said, his voice thick with emotion. Left? What do you mean, left? Our children. They brought us here and drove away. The man was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Then he shook his head in disbelief. Your own children did this? Rosa looked up, her eyes red from crying. They said we're a burden, that they're tired of taking care of us. The man removed his cap and ran a hand through his white hair, genuinely shocked. My name is Josue. I live in a nearby town. I drive this road every day for deliveries. We don't want to be a bother, Antonio started, but Josue raised a hand to stop him. No bother at all. You're coming with me. Get your bags. He helped Rosa into the cab and loaded the suitcases onto the back. Antonio climbed in, and Josue started the engine. As they drove, Josue kept shaking his head in outrage. He had 4 children of his own and couldn't imagine any of them doing such a thing. You raised these kids? He asked. We did, Antonio replied. Gave them everything we could and much more. Paid for school, college, courses, trips, everything. Josue snorted. And now they do this. What kind of world is this, my friend? A world where a child abandons their parents on a roadside. Rosa was quiet, sandwiched between the 2 men. She stared out the window but saw nothing. Her mind filled with the grandchildren she would no longer see grow, the birthday parties she would miss, the Sunday afternoons that were now gone. We had a simple life, but we were happy, she said suddenly. We had nothing, but we had them. Now we don't even have that. Josue glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You're lucky to find out who they really are now. Imagine if you got truly sick. Imagine what they might have done then. Antonio squeezed Rosa's hand. Josue was right. It was painful. It was terrible. But at least now they knew the truth. The children they had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for were empty, selfish people, capable of tossing their own parents aside when they became an inconvenience. The truck continued down the road. Josue said he would take them to his town, where there were good people who would help. Antonio and Rosa said no more for the rest of the journey, just held each other, trying to understand how they had reached this point, how the love they had given had curdled into abandonment, how the children they had created had become cruel strangers, how life had taken such a bitter turn. The truck entered a small town as the sun began to set. Josue pulled up in front of a simple house with a sign that read, "Lourdes Boarding House." "This is Donna Lourdes' place. She's a good soul. I'll talk to her." He got out and returned moments later with a plump woman in her 60s, wearing a floral apron and a smile, despite everything. "Hello, my dears. Josue told me what happened. You'll be staying here with me." Lourdes didn't ask questions that first night. She simply led Antonio and Rosa to a small, clean room at the back of the boarding house. It had a double bed with fresh-smelling sheets, an old but functional wardrobe, and a window overlooking a yard where chickens pecked at the ground. "Rest now. We'll talk tomorrow," she said before closing the door. Rosa sat on the bed and began to cry again, but this time it was a cry mixed with relief. Relief for having a roof over her head, a bed, a place to stay. "We're alive, Rosa," Antonio said, sitting beside her. "It could have been worse." "Worse how, Antonio? Our own children threw us away. I know, but we survived today, and tomorrow we'll survive again." They slept in each other's arms that night, a heavy sleep that comes after a day that shatters you from the inside out. When they woke, the sun was high, and the smell of coffee wafted from the kitchen. Lourdes was making bread. The table was set with coffee, milk, butter, and a simple cake. 3 other people were already at the table. "Good morning. Come sit," Lourdes called out cheerfully. Antonio and Rosa sat down hesitantly. Lourdes introduced everyone. There was Edelson, a mechanic, Jessica, a nursing student who worked at a market, and Paulinho, a truck driver's assistant. "Josue told me what happened," Edelson said. "A terrible situation. We don't want to be a burden," Rosa said softly. "Nonsense," Lourdes replied, placing more bread on the table. "Around here we help each other. You stay as long as you need." "But we can't pay," Antonio explained. "Who said anything about paying? If you want to help out around the house, great. If you can't, that's fine too. No one is going to be out on the street while I have a roof." Tears welled in Antonio's eyes. It had been so long since anyone had treated them with such simple, human kindness. In the following days, Antonio and Rosa settled into the routine of the boarding house. Rosa helped Lourdes in the kitchen and with laundry. Antonio fixed whatever was broken, painted the backyard fence, and repaired a leaky faucet. "You don't have to do all this," Lourdes would say, though she was happy for the help. "Yes, we do," Antonio would reply. "We don't know how to live off charity." The town was called Valle da Esperanza, Hope Valley. It was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. When the story of the abandoned couple spread, the whole town was shocked. People would stop Rosa on the street to give her a hug, bring food to the boarding house, and offer Antonio work. But even surrounded by such kindness, Rosa couldn't forget. Some days she would just stand at the window, watching the street, hoping to see a familiar car, hoping one of her children had come back for them, come back to apologize, to say it had all been a terrible mistake. But no car ever came. One afternoon, while hanging laundry, Rosa saw a woman pass by with 2 small children who were laughing and skipping, their mother holding their hands carefully. Rosa dropped the wet clothes and broke down, sobbing. Lourdes heard her and rushed out. "Rosa, what is it?" "My grandchildren, Lourdes. I'll never see them grow up. I'll never get to bake cakes for them or tell them bedtime stories." Lourdes hugged her right there in the yard, letting her cry until no tears were left. Then she led her inside and made her some tea. "Rosa, I'm going to tell you something," she said, sitting beside her at the kitchen table. "Family isn't just about blood. Family is who stands by you when you need it most. Your children prove they aren't your family. But everyone in this house already loves you. Do you understand? Rosa looked into Lourdes' eyes. This woman she had known for only a few days had more love to give than the children she had raised. "Why are you doing this for us?" Rosa asked. "Because someone once did it for me. When I lost my husband, I had nothing. I was on the street with 3 small children. A lady took me in, gave me food, work, and hope. I promised that if I ever could, I would do the same for others. So here I am." That night, Antonio was organizing their few belongings when Lourdes knocked. "Mr. Antonio, can I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course, Dona Lourdes." "Come in." She entered, closing the door behind her, her expression serious. "I've noticed you're always holding on to that old leather briefcase. You carry it everywhere." Antonio glanced at the worn brown briefcase on the bed. "It has important things inside," he said. "Important how?" He hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Dona Lourdes, I've never told this to anyone, not even my children, but I think it's time." He slowly opened the briefcase and took out a time-yellowed envelope. Inside were old documents, some handwritten, some typed. "When my father passed, he left me a piece of land. I sold it to pay for Marcelo's college. But what no one knows is that my father had another piece of land, one he got in a labor settlement years ago. He never registered it in his name for fear of losing it in a legal dispute, so it only existed in the settlement papers." Lourdes took the documents. There was an old deed, proof of an indemnity payment, and hand-drawn maps. "Does this land still exist?" she asked. "It does. It's in an area that was rural back then, but the city has grown around it. That region is a commercial zone now. Have you ever looked into what it's worth?" "Never. I kept these papers my whole life, thinking I'd leave it as an inheritance for my children. I wanted them to have something of value when I was gone, something to make up for the poverty they endured because of me." Antonio sat on the bed, his voice choked with emotion. "But after what they did, Lourdes, after they left me on that road, I don't know what to do with this anymore." Lourdes sat beside him and took his hand. "Mr. Antonio, you need to see a lawyer. You need to find out if these documents are still valid. Because if they are, you and Dona Rosa could have a dignified end to your lives. Not because of the money, but for the sake of justice. But lawyers are expensive. I know one in town, Dr. Renato. He's a good man. He's helped a lot of people for free. I'll schedule a meeting for you tomorrow." Antonio stared at the papers in Lourdes' hand, the secret he had guarded for decades. "Is there still a chance?" he asked. "There's only one way to find out." The next morning, Lourdes took them to a small office downtown. Dr. Renato, a man in his 40s, listened to their entire story while examining the documents. When he finished reading, he was silent for what felt like an eternity. He took off his glasses, cleaned them, and put them back on. He looked at Antonio with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Antonio, do you have any idea where this land is located today?" "Roughly. I know it's near the main avenue in the capital." Renato turned to his computer, typed in the address from the documents, and pulled up a map. He zoomed in, clicked again, and then froze. "My God," he murmured. "What is it?" Rosa asked, startled. Renato turned the screen towards them. The image showed a huge, empty lot in the middle of an avenue lined with commercial buildings, shops, and banks. "This land is worth a fortune today. A real fortune. I'm talking about millions." Antonio stared at the screen, unable to process what he was seeing. Rosa put a hand to her mouth. Lourdes had to lean against the wall. "Millions," Antonio repeated, as if the word made no sense. "Doctor, are you sure?" Renato turned the screen back and began to explain, showing them aerial photos, sales values of neighboring properties, and real estate market reports. Each number he mentioned seemed more impossible than the last. "Mr. Antonio, this land is in a prime location. It's a completely commercial area now. A plot of this size in this region is worth at least 8 million. It could even go up to 10, depending on the negotiation." Rosa began to shake. Lourdes pulled up a chair and made her sit down. "But how? We lived our whole lives barely having enough to eat," Rosa said faintly. Renato gathered the documents. "I'll explain. This land was acquired by your father in a labor lawsuit decades ago. At the time, it was a worthless place, far from the city. Your father likely accepted it as payment because he had no other choice, but he never officially registered it. The proof of ownership remained only in the court documents. And that's valid? Antonio asked. It is. These documents prove the land legally belongs to your family. What we need to do now is file for adverse possession or regularization of the title. It will take some work, a few months, but your right is here in black and white. Antonio looked at the old briefcase that he had carried for so many years. The one he kept under the bed, hidden from his children, hoping it would be a wonderful surprise after he was gone. But now, everything was different. The children who were supposed to receive this inheritance had left him and Rosa to perish on a deserted road. Dr. Renato, Antonio said, his voice firm, I want to register this land in my name and my wife's name. What do you charge for that? Mr. Antonio, I won't charge you a thing. Your story has moved me. I'll do this pro bono. The only things you'll have to pay are the notary and registration fees, but we can sort that out later. Rosa took her husband's hand. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with a mix of relief, anger, sadness, and hope. And my children? Antonio asked. Can they take this from us? No. As long as you are alive, the land is yours. You can do whatever you want with it, sell it, lease it, build on it, or just leave it be. The choice is yours. Lourdes, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Do you understand what this means? You won't have to depend on anyone ever again. You can have your own home, live with dignity, do everything you've ever dreamed of. But Antonio wasn't happy. He should have been ecstatic, but all he felt was an emptiness in his chest. You know what's funny, Dona Lourdes? We starved our whole lives. I worked since I was 12. Rosa washed clothes until her hands bled. We lived in a shack for years. And all that time we had this. He slapped the documents on the table. If I had looked into this sooner, we could have given our children a better life. They wouldn't have had to suffer. Antonio, don't think like that, Rosa said. How can I not? I sold my father's land for Marcelo's college. I killed myself working to provide for them, and all along I had this fortune tucked away. Mr. Antonio, Renato interrupted gently. You couldn't have known. There was no internet back then. And let me tell you something else. If you had sold this land 20 or 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been worth a tenth of what it is today. The value skyrocketed in recent years with the city's growth. Antonio took a deep breath. Renato was right. So, what do we do? He asked. You go back to the boarding house and live your lives. I'll start working on the paperwork today. In a few weeks, I'll call you to sign some things, and in a few months, you will officially be the owners of a multi-million-dollar property. They left the office in silence. As they walked through the streets of Valle de Esperanza, Rosa stopped. Antonio, should we tell the kids? Tell them what? About the land, the money. They're our children, after all. Antonio looked at his wife. After everything they had been through, she still thought of them. Rosa, they left us on a deserted road. They said we were a burden. Do you really think we owe them anything? It's not about owing. They're our flesh and blood, Antonio. Flesh that is rotted. Rosa looked down. Antonio realized he had been too harsh and hugged her. I'm sorry. I know you're suffering. I am too. But let's not tell them anything yet. Let's wait and see what happens. The days turned into weeks. Renato worked on the documents while Antonio and Rosa continued their quiet life at the boarding house. Then, one afternoon, Lourdes rushed in. Mr. Antonio, there's a man out front looking for you. Antonio's heart leaped. Was it one of his sons? He went to the living room to find a man in a suit holding a briefcase. It wasn't one of his children. Are you Antonio? The man asked. I am. My name is Claudio. I work for Imperial Construction. We're interested in acquiring a piece of land that belongs to you. Antonio's blood ran cold. How do you know about this land? We researched property and areas where we plan to build. We found the old record of your father's labor case. We came to make an offer. I'm not interested in selling. The man smiled. You haven't even heard the offer. We're prepared to pay $7 million cash. $7 million. The number echoed in Antonio's head. I need to think, he said. Of course, but I'll also need the names of the other heirs, your children. We want to make the offer to the whole family. And that's when Antonio understood. If this man was here, others would soon know. It was only a matter of time before his children found out. My children live far away, Antonio said. I don't have contact with them. No problem. We have investigators who locate heirs. The man left a card and departed. Antonio stood there, holding it, sensing a storm was coming. He was right. 2 weeks later, Claudio's team located Marcelo, Patricia, and Bruno. They told each of them about the valuable land, showing them the numbers, the fortune that awaited. Their reaction was immediate. Marcelo left work and started making frantic calls. Patricia panicked, crying and screaming at her husband that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. Bruno hired a private investigator that same day. It took the investigator 3 days to find Antonio and Rosa in Valle de Esperanza. On the 4th day, 3 cars pulled up in front of Lourdes' boarding house. Marcelo, Patricia, and Bruno got out, their arms laden with gifts, flowers, chocolates, expensive shopping bags, all with tears in their eyes and expressions of deep regret. Lourdes answered the door. Are you the children? We are, Marcelo said. We came to get our parents. We were wrong. We're so sorry. Funny how regret shows up when there's money involved, Lourdes said with a sarcastic smile. Please, we just want to talk to them. Lourdes went to the backyard where Antonio and Rosa were. They're here, she said. They looked at each other. They knew this moment would come. They walked into the living room and saw their 3 children with their false faces of remorse. And Antonio realized something. He felt nothing, not anger, not love, not sadness, just a cold, empty space where a family used to be. Marcelo was the first to approach, dropping the bags and opening his arms for an embrace, tears streaming down his face in an over-the-top performance. Dad, we looked for you everywhere. We were desperate. Antonio took a step back, a simple gesture that froze Marcelo in his tracks. He slowly lowered his arms, confused. Sit down, Antonio said coldly, but sit far away from us. Patricia began to wail, moving toward Rosa. Mom, forgive me. We didn't know what we were doing. We were under so much pressure. Rosa also stepped away. Lourdes, leaning against the wall, crossed her arms, satisfied. Pressure, Rosa repeated. Pressure from what, Patricia? From having living parents? No, Mom, it's just, we had so many problems, so many bills. And the solution was to dump us on a deserted road. Antonio cut in, to leave us to die of thirst and heat. Bruno, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Dad, we messed up. We messed up badly, but we're here now. We came to get you. We want to fix this. Fix this? Antonio laughed bitterly. You think this can be fixed, Bruno? You think you can erase what you did? We can try, Marcelo said. We can start over. You can come live with us. We'll take good care of you. Antonio sat down, and Rosa sat beside him. Their children remained standing, clutching their ridiculous gifts. How long has it been since you abandoned us? Antonio asked. About 3 weeks, Marcelo answered. 3 weeks. And in all that time, not once did you feel remorse. Not one of you called to see if we were alive. Not one of you went back to that road. We were ashamed, Patricia whispered. Ashamed? Rosa's voice rose. Shame is what I felt when you pushed me and got in that car. Shame is what I felt watching my own children drive away laughing while I begged on my knees. We weren't laughing, Mom. Yes, you were. I heard you. Let's see if they survive without us. One of you said that. And the others laughed. The silence in the room was suffocating. So tell me, Antonio continued, what changed? Why did you show up now? Because we regret it, Marcelo said too quickly. Lies. Dad, I swear. Lies! Antonio slammed his hand on the arm of the chair. You're here because of the land. That construction company contacted you, didn't they? The change in their faces was instant. Marcelo swallowed hard. Patricia stopped crying. Bruno dropped his phone. How do you know that? Bruno asked. Because I'm not a fool, son. The man from the company came here too. Offered me millions. I knew it was only a matter of time. Patricia tried one last desperate plea. Okay, Dad, it's true. We found out about the land. But that doesn't change the fact that we regret what we did, doesn't it? Antonio stood up. You wouldn't have come back if it weren't for the money. Admit it. You're only here for the inheritance. It's not just about that, Marcelo shouted. We're your family. We have a right to that inheritance. And there it was. The mask had fallen. Antonio smiled, a sad smile of confirmation. A right? You think you have a right? The land belonged to our grandfather, Bruno said. It passed to you, and one day it will pass to us. That's how it works. That's how it works, Antonio agreed, nodding. Family takes care of family. Family doesn't abandon family, but you did all of that. So tell me, are you still my family? Dad, don't say that, Patricia pleaded. I'll say whatever I want. You destroyed this family. You spat on everything your mother and I did for you. He looked at each of them. I worked 50 years breaking my body. Your mother washed clothes until her hands bled. We starved so you could eat. We sold the only land my father left me for Marcelo's college. And now you come here pretending to be sorry just because you found out about another piece of land? We're not pretending, Marcelo insisted. Yes, you are. And you know how I know? Because you didn't even ask how we survived. You didn't care how we got here, who helped us, if we were hungry or sick. The only thing you care about is the land. Lourdes, who had been watching quietly, finally stepped in. I just want to say one thing. I took these two into my home. I gave them food, a bed, and kindness. And you know why? Because they are human beings who deserve dignity. You, their own children, didn't give them that. You treated your parents worse than I would treat a stranger on the street. You have nothing to do with this, Patricia snapped. Oh, but I do, because I saw the state they were in when they arrived. I saw the pain, the desperation. And now I'm watching you with your fake faces and ridiculous gifts, thinking you can buy forgiveness. Marcelo threw the bags on the floor in anger. Fine. You want honesty? I'll be honest. That land is worth millions. And yes, we have a right to it. We are the legal heirs. And if you won't share it willingly, we'll go to court. Go ahead, Antonio said calmly. What? I said, go to court. Hire the best lawyer you can find. Fight for what you think is yours. So you're denying your own children their inheritance? I'm not denying anything. As long as your mother and I are alive, the land is ours, and we will do what we want with it. We might sell it, we might donate it, we might just leave it to people who actually deserve it. Bruno took a threatening step forward. You can't do that. Oh, I can, and I will. Antonio walked to a side table and picked up 3 envelopes. He had prepared them the night before. I wrote a letter for each of you. He handed one to each of them. Inside each was a handwritten letter that read, Son, all your life, I tried to teach you values. I tried to show you that family is more important than money, that love is worth more than gold. But I failed. I failed because you grew into someone I don't recognize, someone capable of abandoning their own parents. So I want you to know, the greatest inheritance a father can leave isn't money. It's character. It's dignity. And you refused those things when you left us on that road. Expect nothing from me when I'm gone because you already received everything I had to give, and you threw it away. Marcelo crumpled the letter, his face contorted with rage. You can't do this. We have legal rights. We're your blood. Blood? Antonio repeated with contempt. Blood means nothing when the heart is rotten. You're being unfair, Patricia cried. We made a mistake. Everyone deserves a second chance. A second chance? Rosa spoke up, her voice steady. You want a second chance? Then answer me this. If we didn't have this land, if we weren't worth millions, would you have come back? Patricia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The silence was the answer. They all knew the truth. Bruno, ever the calculator, tried a new tactic. Look, let's all calm down. We can divide everything fairly. There's enough for everyone. Divide? Antonio laughed. You want to divide what isn't yours yet? But it will be one day. Not if I write a will and leave everything to other people. The bomb had been dropped. The three children were stunned. A will? Marcelo stammered. You can't do that. We're mandatory heirs. The law guarantees us half. That's right, Antonio said, having studied this with Dr. Renato. The law guarantees you half, but only half. The other half I can leave to whomever I please, and I can sell the land right now and do whatever I want with the money. I can spend it all, donate it all, or burn it all if I feel like it. Patricia fell to her knees, this time with real desperate sobs. Dad, for the love of God, we messed up. But you can't take everything from us. We're your children. Children? Rosa approached her. Do children leave their mother to die of thirst? Do children scream that their mother is a burden? I didn't mean it. I was under pressure. Stop with that ridiculous excuse, Rosa shouted. You weren't under pressure. You just didn't want to be bothered with us. Admit it. Patricia's head fell, and finally the truth came out. It's true. We were tired of worrying about you, of giving you money, of visiting, of calling. We just wanted to live our lives without having to carry you with us. The confession hung in the absolute silence. Antonio crouched in front of his daughter. Thank you for finally being honest. Now, I'll be honest too. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you and feel love again, because you killed that love when you left us on that road. He stood up. I want you to leave. Go back to your lives and leave us in peace. But the land? Bruno asked. The land is my problem and your mother's. It's none of your business. Marcelo took a threatening step toward his father, but Lourdes blocked him. Josue, having heard the shouting, entered the house, his large frame and stern face a clear warning. Is there a problem here? He asked. No, Antonio replied. These people, we're just leaving. Marcelo gave his father one last look, full of hatred and greed. You'll regret this. We're going to court. We'll fight for our inheritance and we will win. Go ahead and fight, Antonio said. The courts will take years, and in those years, I'm going to enjoy every last cent of what is mine. The three of them stormed out, slamming the door. As the sound of their cars faded, Antonio's legs felt weak. Rosa held him up as Lourdes and Josue rushed to help. You did the right thing, Josue said. They didn't deserve any of it. Rosa held her husband's hand, tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. Antonio, I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Proud that you had the courage to tell the truth, to not give in, to show them that dignity cannot be bought. For the first time since it all began, Antonio felt a sense of peace. It was a painful peace, the peace of closing a chapter that had to be closed. What do we do now? Rosa asked. Now, Antonio replied, we live with dignity, with respect, and with the people who truly care about us. We've found our real family, and it's right here. Over the next 4 months, while the land title was being processed, Antonio and Rosa continued their simple life at the boarding house. When the papers finally came through, Dr. Renato confirmed it. They were the legal owners of a property valued at over $8 million. Antonio looked at the document, thinking of his children who never called, and of Lourdes, Josue, and the town that had embraced them. I know what to do, he said. 2 weeks later, he gathered their new family, Lourdes, Josue, and their friends from town. I called you here because you are our true family, Antonio began. We've decided to sell the land. The construction company raised their offer to $9 million, and we accepted. A soft whistle came from Josue. And we've decided what to do with the money, Rosa continued, her voice trembling slightly. First, we're giving $1 million to Dona Lourdes. Lourdes gasped, tears streaming down her face. I can't accept that. Yes, you can, Antonio insisted. You opened your home to us when we had nothing. This is for you to renovate the boarding house and live a comfortable life. Josue, Rosa went on, you will receive 500,000. You stopped for us when no one else would. You saved us. The tough-as-nails truck driver wiped his eyes, weeping like a child. We will also donate 2 million, Antonio announced. 1 million to an institution for abandoned elderly, and another million to build a shelter for people with nowhere to go, just like we were. The room was filled with the sound of quiet sobbing. And the other 5 million? Someone asked. That we will use to live, Rosa answered. We'll buy a simple house here in Valle da Esperanza. The rest we'll use to help others who need it. And your children? Jessica asked. Will they get nothing? Antonio sighed. By law, when we pass, they are entitled to half of what's left. We can't change that, but there won't be much left. Because we are going to live. We're going to travel, see things we've never seen, and continue to help people. They signed the papers. That night, sitting in the yard under the stars, Rosa asked, do you think we did the right thing? I think, Antonio said, we did the only thing we could do and still be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. He squeezed her hand. We lost 3 children, but we gained an entire family. 3 months later, they moved into their new home. It was modest, but theirs. Lourdes renovated her boarding house, turning it into a beautiful sanctuary that never turned away those in need. Josue bought a new truck, but continued to stop for anyone stranded on the road, earning the nickname, the Angel of the Highway. The shelter was built within a year. Marcelo tried to sue for his inheritance early, but lost. Patricia sent a letter asking for forgiveness and money in the same envelope. It went unanswered. Bruno disappeared. Nearly 2 years later, a young woman appeared at their gate, holding a child. It was Viviane, Marcelo's wife. I know you have no reason to see me, she said, her voice shaking. But I left him. I couldn't live with a man who could do what he did. And I wanted my son to know his real grandparents. Rosa looked at Antonio, who had tears in his eyes. The baby wasn't to blame. Come in, Rosa said. Come have some coffee. That afternoon, Rosa held her grandson for the first time, weeping with all the tears she had held back. That night, Antonio looked at Rosa and said, you know what I've learned, Rosa? Family isn't who gives you life. It's who makes life worth living. It's the people who stay when there's nothing left. Family loves you for who you are, not what you have. They held hands, old and tired, but finally at peace. They had lost children, but found family. They had discovered millions, but learned that true wealth isn't in a bank. It's in the hearts of those who choose to stand by your side. And in the end, that was the greatest inheritance they left behind.